Hello, my name is Aleksander Wjazdowski from CEC Group based in Warsaw, and I'm happy to lead a conversation with Wojciech Sztuba, a PhD, who will tell us something about the renewables development in Central Europe and across the world, in fact. Before we start, I would like to point out why we are here and why we are discussing the energy transformation in our sector. We are facing an emerging climate crisis across the world, which will result in a huge transformation of not only energy sector, but also many others who are responsible for the CO2 emissions. So, as we may facing severe consequences such as deterioration of biodiversity, as collapse of ecosystems, and for instance, water shortages, we must act now to prevent it. That's why the EU, from a couple of years, puts pressure on our part of Europe to foster the energy transformation, and that's why government in Central Eastern Europe try to reshape its energy policy towards green. So basically, right now in Poland, we observed huge change in government approach towards future energy mix. Currently, the government of PiS has decided to move towards renewables energy, put pressure on the construction of offshore farms, onshore farms, PV power plants, and also nuclear in the next decade. So we are an expert here to discuss it. I will give you a voice and give you a chance to present what you are thinking about the future of renewables energy in Poland, and maybe after the presentation we will have some questions to you about it.
Thank you. Thank you, Aleksander. Welcome, everyone. There will be just few insights about the Polish power sector, the shape it is in right now, and with a special focal point on renewables and the trends that are expected in the near future. Shortly about us, we, TPA Poland, are members of Baker Tilly International. This is a global advisory network, and as we are in the transition of a rebranding to the global brand, we still use two brands, and on our TPA brand we do provide tax and outsourcing services, also real estate advisory services. On the Baker Tilly brands we do provide the rest, which is audit, business advisory and legal, and we work not for all industries, but for only selected ones. One of the main industries we work with is energy sector. TPA is present in 12 countries in the region, in the CEE region, employing over 1,700 experts. And in Poland we do have over 300 people in 3 locations: Warsaw, Poznań, Katowice, and Baker Tilly International is just a global network that I'm sure many of you know. And then let's jump into the short insight into the situation right now we are having in Poland. And in Poland, the situation of the sector is quite specific because of the structure of the generation mix that is very rigid, you could say, and also conserved by the politics of the recent decades and especially the recent years also. This slide is presenting the development of the energy spot prices on the Warsaw exchange. The blue line is the actual price, and the green line is the price without the impact of the CO2 emission rights that you can see in this gray zone here rising. This is the excerpt from our report that I will later talk also, and it's catching the end of 2020. What is actually happening now is this. This is the base price from June this year, from 15 June, so a few days ago. This is the record price of power. This is $100, almost exactly, per megawatt hour. And if you look at the development of the CO2 emission rights, This is again the situation catching the end of the year. Record price by December last year, 37 euro per ton of CO2. This is traded in Leipzig in Germany, the stock exchange for CO2 emission rise in Europe. This is the record price from 14th of May this year, 56 euro almost. This is then quite clear why this situation here is developing that way. And of course, you might ask the questions, this is a traded market, this can go down. In the past, as you can see, the prices for many, many years after implementing of this trading system was pretty much down between 3, 4, and 7 euro per ton, which was actually meaning that the system is not working because it was not motivating strongly enough the heavy consumers, the power sector to modernize, to invest. But after the backloading mechanism introduced by the European Commission a few years ago, this has changed. This is, in fact, a system that is a hybrid system. It is a market, but it is also regulated by the supply. If the price goes too much down, you can be sure that the regulator, the European regulator, will take efforts to push it up again. So actually, the forecast. This is the print screen from this Leipzig Stock Exchange, where this record price was achieved in May. And actually, the forecast that we also presented in our report for the end of this decade was 70 euro, the forecast of the CO2 emission price rising that fast, but it is probably not valid anymore because it's going to happen much sooner than by the end of this decade. And for Polish, not only power sector, but also for the Polish economy in general, it's a very bad news because our structure of our power generation is to 70% based on coal, both black and lignite. And this structure cannot be changed so rapidly. If you look at the wind sector, then you can see the development that goes completely the other way around. The coal-based power generation cannot possibly be efficient. It's actually making losses, and nothing's going to change it. It's not possible because of the regulatory impact on CO2 emission rights. In the wind sector and in this technology, pretty much like with the power, with the PV, with the photovoltaics, the trend is completely opposite. The capacity of the newest technologies is growing fast. It's like a Moore law, pretty much, in chips industry. This what we are seeing here are the test turbines put on the Polish soil and tested at different models. These ones on the right are the newest technologies, but not the ones sold right now and installed right now in Germany, in the UK, or in the Netherlands. This is like 4 megawatts per turbine, Siemens turbine technology, 2 years old, you could say. The problem in Poland is we have still the very rigid regulation that is actually not allowing to install the newest technology because of the height limitations. And in fact, even though there is a very high momentum, and I will show you in a minute how it works with this auction model in Poland that is allowing to build right now approximately 4 gigawatt of new installations being constructed as we speak. These are unfortunately not the newest technologies, not the newest turbines available. These are the oldest one, pretty much in the area between 2.3 megawatt per turbine in average, which means you cannot achieve the highest capacity factor now available in this industry, but a little lower, below 40% mainly, making or abandoning this height regulation, this distance regulation in Poland would open up the market for the newest technology and make the wind generation even more competitive than it is right now. And even right now, it is the cheapest energy source in Poland already for a few years. Here you can see the results of the auction model that was implemented in Poland in 2016 and replacing the old support scheme called green certificates. The green certificates are still running for the old installations, but whatever has been built after 2016 has to apply for the public aid, for the public support via the standard mechanism that is a feed-in premium model, contract for difference. And here you can see the results of the last 3 years auctions for the basket of, these auctions are organized in separate baskets for different technologies, and actually wind, onshore and solar photovoltaics are put together into one basket. No one knows why exactly, but they are competing with each other, and this brings also interesting outcomes. Anyways, the last 2 years, 18, 19, and 20 have given these results, as I said, 2.2 gigawatts traded and for 2019, almost 1 gigawatt 1 year later. Here we have no data officially published by the Polish Regulatory Office, but from our research it results also approximately 1 gigawatt being now constructed. Altogether it is close to 4 gigawatt. Here is you can see also the average selling price of electricity. So the wind producers, they go for 15 years contract with the Polish state, offering the average prices of that size in Polish zlotys, whereas this stock market, you can say black energy price, from 15th of June this year is 370. You can see the difference, how this works. The coal-fired power plants have to cope with the increasing cost of generation because of CO2 emission, and then actually cannot beat that. Yeah? And this price is actually going down typically, especially if you deploy this newest technology. And then we have this auction that was done sooner than normally. In the past, the auctions for each year were done at the very last end of the year in December. Now this year's auction has been already organized and executed on 8th of June, and the results are not yet published. Our estimation is that this will be approximately 500 megawatt new capacities to be installed in wind onshore. Here we have like more detailed information about these auctions budgets in each year in this basket for photovoltaics and wind onshore in the large scale installations over 1 megawatt. Just short summaries. 2 first years, no actions at all for this industry. Politically, this was not really supported, and even though the auction model was in place, no auctions have been organized. But then in 18 it started, and actually because of this competition in this basket, PV plus wind onshore used to be way cheaper than photovoltaics, and it was taking all the capacity, actually, all the budgets from these auctions, until it started to change recently, because photovoltaics demonstrated the ability to really go down with the prices. And even though these reference prices, maximum prices that the producer is pitching for a tender, has a different maximum for wind and different for photovoltaics, higher for photovoltaics. Actually, the PV investors had to bid under the wind price in order to win something, and they did. So actually in 2020, in last December auction, approximately 20% of the capacity of this basket was taken by the PV investors, and our estimate for this June auction from few weeks ago is that it is going to be even more. We estimate that this approximately 65% is going to be wind, but all the rest, almost 35%, should be photovoltaics. And then, of course, the question is, because these wind projects that are pitching here are still suffering this 10H regulation. Maybe short explanation. This distance regulation that I mentioned was introduced in 2015, and it means that the turbine cannot be actually permitted in the area of housing buildings closer than 10 times of the height of the turbine, including rotor, which means that you practically cannot build anything closer than 2 kilometers away from any building. And in Poland is a kind of dense country, so it practically means no development under this rule. And this is why the auctions here, all these 4 gigawatts are projects that have been developed before the end of, or the beginning of 2016. That is why they are dealing with these old types of turbines, not stronger than 3 megawatts per turbine. And abandoning this 10H rule is the prerequisite for this industry to grow again. And this is actually also what is very much expected right now. Even politically, we see a very good development. There is a project already waiting in a parliament prepared by the governing coalition. So with the quite high likelihood of being pushed forward, and it's quite likely that until the end of this year, this is something that is going to be abandoned. But regardless of the auction model, the auctions seem to not to be that important in the nearest future, and in the more distant future even less, because this technology is becoming cheap enough to fly without public aid. And the development that is very well seen in Europe, in the EMEA region, you can see here the so-called corporate PPAs, corporate private power purchase agreements that are replacing public PPAs in many countries. This has various reasons. On one hand, big players on the market close the public support for the development of the portfolio of renewables, like in UK or in Germany and many other countries. On the other hand, there is fast increasing demand for green energy, and there are large consumers, large brands, global brands that change rapidly their CSR policies, and they just want to demonstrate that they cover their own consumption only by green sources, regardless where these sources are. Which means that the Google is interested in having a facility that is producing green energy, even in Poland or in other distant location, because this is like a balancing issue, not really the direct line that has to be connected to the consumer. And this is the dynamics of it shows how fast it is growing, and of course, majority of these PPAs is wind, and PV is rising. In the EMEA region, this is the breakdown of industries that are interested in the issue. Of course, heavy consumers, like heavy industries, are like the candidate number one. But not only, you will see also consumer goods producers and brands, because of the CSR issue that seems to be more and more important, becoming or moving from a best practice to sort of minimum standard. It is really happening. In Poland, we have 11 PPAs closed until now. Not much, just few hundred megawatts of installed capacity. But you can see the brands, the firms, the consumers that went for that. This is Mercedes, this is Asahi, the beer producer. This is Orange, the telecom, and Polkom also, the telecom. So on one hand, it is commercial, because you're by contracting a wind farm with the same level of price, 15 years, 10 years, 200,000 zlotys per megawatt, 1 hour, it's actually cheaper than the spot market price, and it is green. So this combination of these two factors is really creating a market. And I would like to share with you at the end of my presentation a slide in which we compare the approach to the forecasting of what can happen with wind sector onshore and offshore. I didn't speak much about offshore, but offshore is developing quite fast, even though we have no single turbine yet installed on the Polish Baltic Sea, but actually 3 companies, large companies, are on their way, and it's quite likely that 6 gigawatt will be installed really by the end of this decade. So there is like a larger consensus on that. But there is a lesser consensus on how the onshore wind sector is going to be developed in future. And here we can see on the left, this is the Polish government forecast, actually published 3 months ago. Very conservative, still protecting a large share of coal-fired generation by the end of this next decade, by the end of this decade and by the end of 2040. And here we can see the independent experts' opinions, McKinsey report and Instrat report, the Polish agency. And there are often differences between public and private experts, but in this very case, I tend to believe that the private ones are much more closer to the reality, to this more realistic scenario of the development. Poland cannot have 30% share of coal-fired power generation by the year 2040. It's not possible because of this financial situation that I described before. Also, you can see here that the official forecast assumes drop in the onshore portfolio. We actually are going to have 10.5 within 2-3 years, because 6.5 are already operating in Poland, and 4+ are under construction as a result of the Russell auctions. So this is actually a drop in the portfolio assumed in the official papers, which is leaving space for coal, and also for a nuclear generation scenario that is also unfortunately neither much realistic. So this McKinsey and Instrat reports and estimations seem to me much more realistic. And if this goes that way, it means a tremendous potential for investment in the wind energy sector, both onshore and offshore. The offshore 6 gigawatt is under construction, but the capacity of the Polish Baltic Sea, which is a fantastic kind of a sea area to develop power because of the stability of wind, high speed of wind, and shallow water. As some say, that is much more favorable than the North Sea.
Yeah. More than 20 gigawatts to construct on Baltic
Even
Sea.
some say McKinsey is supporting more than 35, for instance, also. So and a capacity of up to 36, 37 gigawatt being installed onshore. It's quite likely that it's feasible as well. So. If you look at this potential, Polish wind conditions onshore, the physical conditions in Poland are also very favorable comparing with the rest of Europe, are fair enough to go for this industry. And there is another interesting factor that is this benchmark, which is a relatively high energy production costs that will be with us for at least 15-20 years because of the high share of coal. And this means that the investors in the wind business may not or will not have to cope with the very rapid drop in prices that will be the case in countries where the mixed generation is much more modern and renewable, let's say. Yeah? So this was the end of my short intro. We just published this report, the 8th edition of the Wind Energy in Poland report. It is now based on onshore. We did that in the past for a few years in a row. Then we stopped after introducing of this 10H regulation that was like ruining for the industry. But now it's a good momentum, good traction again, and the report is you can download it freely from our webpage here. So thank you very much, Alexander.
Yeah, thank you very much for this interesting presentation. I have a couple of questions to you. First of all, let's come back to the beginning of your presentation and CO2 emission prices. I would like to ask you in your opinion, is the fast track for Poland to stop the increase of the prices for private consumers and for industries? I guess that it would be very tough, but once we have to wait for the onshore and offshore new farms a couple of years now. So then, if prices are rising so rapidly, what we can do right now to stop it? I mean,
this is a very tough question. This is like, in fact, it is already happening. Like, for instance, the electricity prices for households and private consumers are artificially put down by the regulatory, which is making the power generators, the big Polish state-owned capital groups that are keeping the majority of the portfolio in a quite difficult financial situation, and more difficult with each year, which is also actually limiting the ways of doing that further in the future. Actually, the only reasonable way is to immediately start the transformation of our sector. There is one of the strategy that the government is considering is to put these coal-fired generation assets for all the 4 groups we are having into one kind of agency, energy security agency. Yes. that was like drafted, and let this agency like close them one by one, starting with the least efficient, and give some subsidies for that, and the European money for that. And the problem is with that there's a low likelihood of a consent of the European Commission for that, because in fact a similar program has been started in Germany a few years ago, and it has not proved to be very efficient, and the European Commission was very skeptical about it. So there is like, there are doubts if we will be able to do that way. Otherwise, we will need to find another way to reduce the portion of the energy produced from the coal-fired. Another story is coal, because it is a social issue in Poland. Many people work in this industry, in minery sector and stuff. But actually, we need to start thinking about separating this. And it's another thing to support people that need support because of the restriction of the economy. And another thing is like using the coal and actually produce electricity out of it.
Right. So just after the coal phased out, we will have quite a different situation in our energy mix because of the huge share of RES in our energy mix. So do you agree that we have to stabilize grids with huge RES share in energy mix? Or do you believe that, for example, energy storage will be the response for the problem? So basically, do we have something stable such as gas power plants or nuclear power plant in next decade or not?
A few issues are here important. One is the so-called baseload. You cannot go down with the minimum capacity of the power generation in the system under certain minimum level that is typically like an off-peak situation. In Poland, it is estimated to be 27 gigawatt. So, and all of this is, of course, coal-fired. So you cannot switch off the coal-fired and put renewables only in that place, because you will not be in a position to balance this the demand and supply, because the renewables such as wind, but also photovoltaics are not stable enough, yeah, and the capacity is a bit lower. So of course you cannot structure the generation mix based on wind only. You need to balance it with different measures, and nuclear is an answer. Could be an answer if this would be reasonably projected with reasonable global partner, because definitely this is like a technology issue. But even though if there is a project of that type, that will the only plants that we have ever seen were about up to 6 gigawatt of nuclear power plant. It's not much, so it would be probably a meaningful thing to start that project, like really start, if we want to switch off the coal-fired power plants. But even though if we start today, it's not something that will be done within 10 years or 15 even. It is necessary, but not enough. And of course,
for some representatives of Polish government, the gas is the response. We can build very fast, very effective gas power plants in like 2 or 3 years and replace the coal assets. So
This is actually already happening, that the coal-fired power blocks in generation units in these traditional power plants are one by one often replaced with gas-fired blocks. This is, for instance, Dolna Odra, that is belonging to PGE and is close to Szczecin in northern Poland. It fits well to be delivered and supplied by the gas from this LNG terminal, and it's actually already prepared for, and it's modernized that way. And yeah, this is definitely something that is also on its way. Importation of power. And increasing grid capacity to do that, to be able to do it.
Politically difficult for every government.
But it's happening too. Yeah. The PEC, the national grid operator, is actually investing, it already did to some extent, to increase the potential importation capacity, just in case. Yeah. And another thing is the rest of the infrastructure, which is like a transmission grid and distribution grid. It is an issue. As I said, these four major capital groups that are owning the generation portfolio, they are also related to the distribution portfolio and transmission portfolio. And this is requiring very, very high volume investments, at least to absorb the new renewables. New renewables are not easy, especially if there are many, and especially if they are in areas like northern Poland that were typical energy distribution area, but not energy reception area like southern Poland. So this is clearly an issue, and will be certainly one of these breaking factors for the growth of the industry, but hopefully not that important.
All right. So my last question is about the law. You are an expert in onshore and wind energy, but also an experienced lawyer. So my question is, would you recommend some legislative incentives for RES sector in Poland, apart from the law about onshore wind farms and infamous 10H rule, but maybe something else would you like to recommend to the decision makers in Poland and maybe even leaders in Central Europe as well?
I'm not a lawyer, but there are issues that, of course, are important for the industry, and you need to look completely separately at onshore. The sea power generation at sea, it requires. It actually a lot has happened. We have a new law since few months in place, and new act, an offshore act, and then there are these execution acts are further acts are actually being now implemented. So it's actually on one way happening. On the other, there are many other questions that need to be answered in this offshore area, such as a port that can actually service the development phase, the construction phase, which is not that easy. And the government clearly doesn't want that the entire Polish offshore portfolio is serviced by the Danish ports or German ports. So, but it requires preparation so that this construction can start by 2024, which is projected. All these three, at least two of these three developers want to start construction at sea, on sea, in 3 years from now. So it's not much time left. But actually, support scheme, and from that perspective, it looks like sufficient for this to start flying. And if we talk about onshore wind sector, definitely this distance regulation should be abandoned as soon as practicable. That would be also nice if corporate PPAs would be structured in a way and supported, so that they are easier to be financed. The issue is for now that banks are reluctant to finance investments that are based on corporate PPAs that are shorter than 10 years, for instance, because the auctions contracts, public PPAs, are traded for 15 years. So it's, of course, much greater security. But in fact, this market will develop anyways, because it's like a little free market and without many constraints. Or helping with some legal framework that will make it easier will help very much. But abandoning 10H rule, it would be just the crucial prerequisite for the business to grow.
Well, thank you. It's all from my side. I don't know whether there is a question from the and the other participants of our discussion. I guess no. So, thank you very much for your time and for this interesting.
Thank you very much, and I believe we need to log in on the roundtable.
Yeah, in a couple of minutes. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.